we are recapping the entire 2025 NHL Draft as it relates to the Boston Bruins. Razor and Brick with me, but of course we're going to be looking at other notable picks around the league. We're going to stick with the Bees for now. James Higgins of Boston College, chosen in the first round, 7th overall. And with the 51st pick in the second round, the Boston Bruins chose William Moore in round 2. He's going to play for the BC Eagles and spent last season with the U.S. National Development Team. And let's recap the rest of the picks. We're going to deep dive into William Moore, but just wanted to show you the rest of the picks done by the Boston Bruins. So there it is: James Higgins, William Moore, Liam Pettersson, Cooper Simpson, and more. But the guy who knows most about those selected, Ryan Nadeau and Judd Sirott, they went one-on-one. Ryan Nadeau, the director of amateur scouting for the Boston Bruins. Let's hear from them right now.
Ryan, let's start here. Big picture. A lot of the picks that you made today, if you look at it in total, what do you feel like this group adds to the organization?
Well, I think first and foremost, we added a lot of high-end ability, a lot of offensive upside, some skill, some pace, just a few players that have some excitement with the puck.
The headliner obviously came on night one, and that's James Higgins. And if I had asked you back in January or what your reaction would be, if James Higgins was going to be able to fall to you at 7, what would have been your reaction back then?
Well, I would have been really surprised. One, that to be in a spot to pick James Higgins first, and then, to have him available, a player with that much excitement with the puck, that much ability to dictate the game, that's just a real exciting pick for us.
Beyond some of the guys beyond James Higgins, who was taken in the first round, who were you really excited was available to you when you started picking in the second round and beyond?
Well, I mean, certainly when we look at Will Moore and what he brings to the table, that's a player that for us, we certainly had some very high ratings on him and think, there's a lot of skill and ability that can really help, augment our group. And throughout it's a unique process in that as you watch it, like there was a point where, there were a number of players right before even we picked Will Moore that there were a lot of players on the board, and you're like, wow, this is a good group. Like, just excitement to be able to be in a spot to make a pick there.
In the big picture, and you've been doing this for a while, just how vital is it to be able to find legitimate NHL players beyond the first round?
Yeah, I mean, obviously a lot of focus goes into those first round and higher end picks, and rightfully so. But yeah, we've got to work really hard to find players throughout the draft that can add some value to the organization in terms of being able to impact at all different spots. It's obviously a lot harder to find a top line or a top 6 or even a middle 6 or a top pair D type later in the draft, but there's a lot of value to being able to find players that can play for your NHL team or become an asset to play for someone else's team.
For the last couple of years, the GM Don Sweeney has mentioned, I really need to be able to give my amateur guys more picks, more swings. I haven't been able to do that because the team has used some of those assets to get others to help them at the NHL level. I guess with that in mind, because you had a lot of opportunities, how different was it for you and the staff this season for the draft?
Yeah, it was certainly unique on our end to be in a situation to make a lot of picks, particularly a high pick in the first round and have second round picks. Like it's kind of funny because I've been with the Bruins for a long time and been with Don Sweeney and Cam Neely for a long time, and he's typically apologizing to us for not having picks, but we obviously we're in this to win. So we love being in the playoffs and love chasing to get another cup. Like, so it's you get over the disappointment of, man, the season didn't really turn out the way we envisioned, but then you're quickly excited to say, hey, we can help be part of the process to restock this and get us back quickly in the right direction. So, it's kind of bittersweet to look at it and say, normally we don't have this amount of picks, and, but now Don comes to us and says, hey, we've got some capital, you guys got to do your stuff. So, certainly energize the group and really focused on how we can bring in some players that have an opportunity to make a big impact for the organization.
Ryan, last thing, and I really appreciate your time. Now that the draft has ended, how long does it take for you and your staff to be able to evaluate how successful this class is, and what do you use to judge those attributes?
Yeah, so we'll take some time to actually first go back and talk about and reflect on how the draft played out, the actual execution and process of moving around the board and exploring potential trades in different scenarios. Then we'll watch our guys at development camp, and that's just the first real step once you draft them. It takes almost draft classes up to 5 years to really have a good feel for where the whole class went, where we may have undervalued certain players, where we maybe overvalued others. So we'll continue that process. We always reflect and look at different ways that we can do things better. But we'll certainly spend some time sort of just decompressing for a bit, but then quickly into dev camp. We don't have a lot of time there. And then, we really go into and turn the clock pretty quickly on the next set of draft picks. So we'll start scouting as soon as next week. We'll have guys going to different events and starting to, really tie together next year's draft.
Ryan, thanks a ton. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks, Judd.
It's definitely a job that never ends. I said this to Don Sweeney. As someone who has decision paralysis, I'd rather do anything than that. I will stick to this career. Brick, what stood out from you from what Ryan Nadeau had to say about this year's draft class?
Yeah, real quickly, two things. If you're going to be a consistently quality hockey team in the NHL and compete for Stanley Cups, you got to do what? You got to draft and you got to develop. You can't forget the second half of that phrase, draft and develop. So they've done their analysis. They've identified the young players that they targeted and went out and drafted. Now the key is, can they develop these players to be future Bruins and help this team win, a lot of games during the regular season. And even though this isn't relevant because it happened 15 years ago, but when the Bruins won the Stanley Cup in 2011, that team was full of impactful second and third round players. And I always keep that in mind, that there's value picks to be made in day 2 of the draft, and you hope that's what the Bruins were able to accomplish today.
I was going to go with the development part, and that's where the second, third round picks, that's where they really flourish from great development and having opportunities and being put in the proper place. There's tons of skill in these guys that are drafted in the 7th round, for that matter. They just haven't maybe been on the same path development-wise prior to the draft. But you can put them on a proper path to really get the most out of them. So the draft is one thing, and the Bruins haven't had a top 10 pick in forever. They haven't had a lot of picks in the first 2 rounds in the last 5, 6, 7 years. But let's not overlook the fact that, yes, they have these picks now, and that's fun, and it makes for a great show today. But really, the work does. It's strictly the starting line. It is anything but that.
And we're going to get a little taste, or they're going to get a little taste of what that development might look like at development camp, which begins Monday. Yours truly will be there. NESN will be covering that.